Thanks so much, Julia and Ludo, for organizing everything. And it seems like this year is another roaring success. And welcome participants and everybody else to the first of these two roundtables about the NTP. Today is kind of a spiritual successor to the conversation that was had in June last year about the NTP. A spiritual successor, but slightly different in its specifics. So last year was a lot of talk about whether NTP was a success or a failure, and the kind of verdict that we arrived at from it. Whereas Julia said already that this year is a lot about implementation, practical stuff, mundane, day to day, how the sausage gets made, I guess. So we can all have a chat about those specifics, and that kind of segues fairly closely into who I am and why I'm here chairing this conversation. So my name is Fionn Finegan. I am the commercial director for a company called TutorCruncher, and TutorCruncher they build and provide tutor management software to tutoring companies and just people who operate in kind of private education space. So the reason that I'm here is that all that kind of mundane implementation, day-to-day stuff, all the scheduling that is involved in tutoring, all the CRM stuff, the invoicing, the analytics, the tutor onboarding processes, all these kind of stuff is exactly what we do. We automate that, we make it a lot easier, we cut down the time you have to spend doing it so you can refocus on things like education. So this is a great opportunity for me and for us just to hear about the kind of things that NTP providers have to think about on a day-to-day rolling basis. And provide, maybe I can learn from this some solutions that maybe we could provide for. We already have some of our clients who use our software to run their NTP services as well as their private clients, some of whom will be on the roundtables today. You might hear from. But yeah, that's my involvement. I expect to get a lot out of it for those reasons, and I'm sure everyone else will be the same. So in that spirit, why don't we kick off and maybe do some introductions? So how about you start with maybe Johnny Manning, who's the founder of Manning's Tutors. So would you say a few words, Johnny, get the ball rolling?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for having me chat to you guys today. As Fionn points out, Johnny Manning, founder of Manning's Tutors, we have been delivering tuition to disadvantaged pupils in schools and academies since 2008. So really, what the NTP is what we've been doing for 13 years. And the NTP came along and sort of turbocharged that and gave us the opportunity to go and do that with more schools in more places. We do use TutorCruncher, have been using TutorCruncher since 2017. We actually count that as like since when records began. We were looking at it the other day. We've got 997 tutors since we started using TutorCruncher, and I've got no idea how many I had before that. So that has become the day that records started, apparently. And we're very happy with everything that Fionn points out about TutorCruncher. We were NTP partners in the first year and successfully applied and were granted trusted provider status in the second year. So well into this year's delivery now and trying to make the best success of it as possible.
Fantastic.
We need to Fionn, you're the chair. Who's next?
Yeah, very good question. How about we move on to Vanessa? So Vanessa Leach is the MD of Tute Education. You want to say a few words?
Hi Fionn. Hi everyone. Thank you for having me back, Julia. It's really nice to be back today. So I'm Vanessa. I work for Tute Education, former teacher, been with Tute for about 8 years, and the main purpose of Tute is that our qualified teachers deliver live online lessons that fill gaps in the education of children and young people. So when the NTP came along, it was a really good fit for us, and like Johnny, it enabled us to do that with a load more students and a load more schools. We were a tuition partner last year, tuition partner again this year. That's me.
Great. Lovely to hear from you, Vanessa. Nice to meet you. We have Helen Giorgio as well, who's the MD of EM Tuition, if you'd like to say a few words on.
Hi, I'm Helen Giorgio, and EM Tuition are a non-for-profit company, and we provide free tuition to financially disadvantaged children. And to help pay for that, we applied for the National Tutoring Programme to make sure that we could support as many kids as possible. So this is our second year of doing National Tutoring Programme. The first year we worked with about 4,500 children, and we're ready up to about 2,500 this year. It's all going really well. We work with kids all the way through from year 1 through to year 11, face-to-face and online. Always looking for new tutors to help deliver, and also always looking for volunteer tutors for our evening online to deliver to financially disadvantaged.
Great. Sounds fantastic. Perfect. We keep it going maybe with Stephen Emsley from Connects Education.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Emsley. I'm a group director for the Classroom Partnership, which is one of the kind of broad overarching companies for Connects Education, and also head of tuition for Connects. So we are a recruitment, training and tuition provider, been going since 1999. And again, like everyone has said before, NTP came along and it was really a supercharged for us last year. So we delivered to around about 25,000 pupils last year, and we're already getting towards that point for this year as well. So we're going to be past that by probably February half term. And yeah, it's been a real kind of change to our business model, kind of being on the NTP and what we're doing this year.
Fantastic. That sounds great. We have Daniel Sugarman as well, so owner of Remedy Recruitment, specialised in education among other things, and Tutors Association board member, right, Daniel? I think you're muted at the moment, are you?
Good morning, all.
There we go. Got you now.
Am I on? Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning. I thought this was a game show. Look at the faces. It's like something like look through the keyhole. I can see people with cats in their video screens and people's houses. All amazing. If you want to know about sort of me, company, family, we've been working with looked after children, and I'm using that as a bracket, since 1984. So that can be within medical, education, tutoring, social work and care. So very, very long time. I'm not on the NTP. We've been going down the school-led tuition route, but I deal with, I'm not going to say which boroughs, but I deal direct with LEAs and schools anyway, just for the longevity of it. We're working with Randstad. We should find out if we're going to be on the NTP within probably the next couple of weeks. But bar that, this is something that we've been doing, as I said, for God knows how many years now. So yeah, we continue to do so. There's probably about 50 recruitment consultants that are sitting under me here in the office, all working as we're speaking out there. So excuse the noise if you hear anything.
Fantastic. That's great to hear, Daniel. Looking forward to those contributions. And then last, and I'm sure not least, Adam Alagia Glomsa.
Can't hear you.
Oh yeah, if you're speaking Adam, I can get you there. But CEO of Talent Ed, yeah?
Hi, thanks, Fionn. Very happy to be here and good to see some familiar faces. That was, can I just say, that was an admirable effort, my surname, but don't worry.
Oh, yeah, that was the one I was weakest on. All right.
I stick with Adam. Yeah, so as Fionn said, Chief Executive of Talent Ed. We're a charity like EM Tuition. We started just under 10 years ago, working specifically with disadvantaged young people. And we exclusively use qualified teachers as our tutors. We were a part of the NTP last year and again this year. So really looking forward to discussing the ins and outs and ups and downs of that experience.
Fantastic. Looking forward to hearing it as well. Okay, so why don't we kick off then? I'll keep the questions quite broad, so you can contribute just whatever your own experiences are, but I've kind of broken today down into a few different general topics. So maybe we could start off with assessment and the role that assessment has played in your NTP work. So however you're doing assessment with NTP work, is it significantly different than you used to do with private clients? or with local authorities that you used to work with? And is it just kind of an exercise in box ticking, or have there been like lessons that you've learned from it that you'd like to implement more generally? So anyone who wants to contribute on that? Yeah.
I'm happy to start. We actually don't do assessment as part of the NTP.
Okay.
And we found that very quickly after starting last year, that we don't do assessment. We rely totally on the schools because they know their pupils best, for giving us the levels and where they should be at. I've got a good background in assessment, and I know how long assessment takes. You can do an initial assessment, but that doesn't really tell you a lot about the child in an initial assessment. You would really need good diagnostics, and you can spend hours and hours on diagnostics. And as we only get 15 hours with the pupils, we rely totally on the schools for the assessment. As I said, we started last year, but that was a very quick lesson learned, that trying to put assessment into place and trying to get the right levels quite quickly did not help the pupil on what we needed to do, and that was looking at the gaps and catching up. So having the schools give us that information and providing it works for us, and it works for the schools as well.
That's interesting. Yeah. Daniel under yeah, Daniel. Oh, sorry, I think we're muted again. Yeah. I can't hear you yet, I'm afraid.
Can I ask Helen, because obviously I haven't been working alongside the NTP, regarding the 15 hours, and with a lot of things that have come out in national press, etc., about Randstad's trying to push even more hours out because they're trying as hard as they can, and they've already said that they've delivered us so many hours. Now, as we all know, and for the tutors out there and for people that own companies, etc., I doubt very much if a child has the 15 hours, for some reason, not all 15 hours will actually be tutored for, you know, not turning up to the actual class, or, you know, there's a loads of reasons why a child might not be there. So out of those 15 actual hours that is supposed to be delivered, is all 15 hours actually delivered every time to every single tutor?
No,
A child, I should say.
most of the time, yes. I mean, we've got quite a high level of attendance, very high level of attendance, really. And I suppose because we do quite a lot of face-to-face, the level of attendance face-to-face is much higher than the level online. And online in schools better than online at home. It depends on the children and the pupils they put on on the NTP. But we've got some schools it's really poor, but other schools we've got, we build that relationship and the communication plan beforehand and say to them, after 2 lessons, if somebody doesn't turn up, we want it replaced. So we are quite strict on that. So if we have 2 absences, we'll go down the route of taking them off. 2 absences consecutive, we go on the route of taking them off and say, let's replace them with someone who's going to benefit from this. We're really about making sure that someone benefits and not having, government money being wasted on kids not turning up.
So may I ask one more question, the second part to that, because I'm sure we've got some amazing tutors online here. When do you think a tutor's, or the amount of children that, whether it be 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, a tutor is at its best, where it's not a small classroom, it's actually a tutoring actual lesson? 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, 1-5, what do you think is the best sort of pivotal number for a tutor, rather than a small classroom scenario?
1-to-1.
1-to-1.
Yeah, it's always going to be best.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I think value for money wise, in terms of making sure that the NTP funding reaches the most pupils, but like you say, it's still targeted tuition, and it's not, a classroom, as you say. I think 3-to-1 has always been the sweet spot. That's where we operated prior to the NTP. Schools would think that they were getting better value for money by pushing 4-to-1 or 5-to-1, but inevitably someone slips to the back of those classes. The other benefit of 3-to-1, like you say, on the attendance front, if there's a pupil that's absent, then at least there's you've got a 66% chance of one of the other two kids is going to be there as well. So the session still goes ahead. Someone still gets the benefit, and the money's not wasted. Because the last thing you want is you've set up a one-to-one, the kid doesn't turn up, and you still need to pay the tutor, you still need to charge the school. That's money that's wasted. Adam, you had your hand up way before me. I've got more things to say, but you've been sitting very patiently, so I'm going to let you talk for a second, and then maybe I'll come in with my other point.
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, and just on that, I completely agree. We either do 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 for exactly the reasons Johnny outlined. I think there is value in having more than one student, so it's not just they can learn a bit from their peers as well. I just wanted to go back to the point about assessment, because we also last year brought in an assessment tool, and I think there are 2 reasons why you would do that kind of assessment. The first is for sort of evaluation, a pre and post, and you can look at distance traveled. That we found is useful, but it's a bit tricky to do well. The second reason is just to give the tutor an insight, and it's not going to be a concrete, they need to focus on geometry more than trigonometry, but it does give the tutor an indication before tuition starts what sort of level are their pupils operating at, and we found that has been quite helpful for our tutors. It's short, so it's, we're not talking an hour-long assessment, but it's enough to give the tutors a feel for where to pitch their sessions before you have session number 1.
Yeah, I'll just come in about TUT. I agree with you, Helen. We very much depend as well on what the school tell us about the students. So we ask the schools to give us the specific focus for the learning, so they will base that on their own internal assessment. And then, of course, we'll then build a learning programme based on that, which is not set in stone, because any formative assessment that the tutors will do throughout the programme changes either the pace, the level, or the content. We will talk to the school to say we think this content needs to change or the level needs to change. But they pretty much trust us to get on with it. But last year we did not have a pre and post assessment, because I agree it does give a good indicator, but it's not the best indicator, I don't think, of 1, the distance travelled, or 2, the weaknesses, if you like, or the gaps that lie in the students' learning. But this year for the NTP, there was a note, I think, in the standards that we needed to have, or needed to show that we had the pre and post assessment. So we are working with EdPlace, who supply a pre and post assessment for us. You may have heard of EdPlace. And actually some schools have found that really useful, because it's a quick way of them being able to just diagnose where the gaps lie in their students' learning. We don't administer that for them. We ask them to administer it so that they kind of buy in to the whole programme. So they're not just pushing it aside and going, right, TUT will take care of the pre and post and all the learning. The schools have to buy into it. So that's really working well for us. And then also we assess not just the academic outcomes of the students, but their confidence and the engagement as well. So we have an impact and evaluation manager who does that. So she does measure the attainment, and there are case studies that are running that she's putting together, but she's also assessing the overall impact on the engagement and enjoyment, and we do that through regular student surveys. So there's a student voice survey at the beginning of an NTP programme. And then to answer your question, Daniel, not all of those 15 hours are tutoring, because they do that survey the first lesson and we tell them why they do it. And then we survey them at the end as well, just to see how, the questions might be, how confident are you now in English? And then at the end, how confident do you think you are now in English? And the distance travel there is often far greater than any pre and post assessment would show.
And we have Stephen and Johnny to come in a second, but just to follow up on the points that Helen and you raised, Vanessa, when schools hand you that assessment, how are they doing that? Is there any kind of like standardized format that they provide that information? Do you kind of want one or need one, or are you, however they provide it, are you happy with the way it's provided and that you can share that information with tutors? And
yeah, we need it because you're delivering so many lessons and managing so many tutors. There has to be some form of standardization, because it can't be different for every school. So the way that we do it is we give schools 2 choices. They have a simple booking form from us. One choice is they can choose we have 45-minute lessons, so our 15 hours are 19 lessons. So there's an hour at the beginning, an hour at the end, and then 45 minutes in between. So they either choose their 18 learning objectives for those 19 lessons, the first being getting to know the tutor and the programme, or they can choose from a menu that we've created based on the national curriculum. So they generally know from their assessment what they need for the students. So they will look at our menu and they will basically like a pick a mix. so they will choose a couple of lessons here, 3 lessons from that topic, 5 from this topic, and then they supply that to us and it automates a programme for the students. And again, it does depend on the formative assessment throughout that programme as to whether those topics are the ones that the students need. So it has to be standardised for us.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Stephen, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I kind of pick up on some of Helen and Adam's points. So last year we didn't have, we relied totally on the schools for baseline and endpoint, the information coming from the schools. This year we've got a hybrid model where we can either rely on the schools giving us that information, or we have a set of assessments and endpoint assessments for us to be able to kind of work with that school. And it's entirely down to the school to give us that information, and whether they want to use ours or whether they have, if you've done a test last week and you want tuition to start this week, then it stands to reason that you would use the school's assessment data to then go through with the tutor. If you haven't baselined that child since September, that information may potentially be out of date, or other gaps may have arisen, so they would use ours. So it's really working on an individual basis with every school to make sure that we have the right programs in place so that they can get the most out of that 15 hours of tuition. And just to pick up on Vanessa's point, that we also do that kind of confidence building assessment as well, because I think from our year 1 delivery, that was a real strength in terms of that tuition that was provided, not only the subject knowledge enhancement, but also the confidence of going back into the classroom and really kind of being able to engage in those lessons more than they've ever done before. And that can't be understated as a real key benefit from tuition at either 1 to 3, 1 to 2, or 1 to 1.
Absolutely, that's really interesting. Johnny, do you want to jump in there as well? Maybe if we finish off this topic with you. Oh, I think you're muted there.
To echo Vanessa and Stephen's points, I think measuring confidence is a really key one in this, because if you can improve the pupil's confidence, then the impact of the 1 hour of tuition you deliver is not going to just be in that hour, but it's them going back into class and they're the one with their hand up and engaging a lot more and linking hard work with success. In terms of the assessment, I mean, we follow a model of feeding off of the school's data, because as everyone's pointed out, they're doing enough assessments already without wasting 20% of the 15 hours we're delivering doing more assessments. But we've got to be careful and think about the legacy of the NTP here. We're aiming to move from where we were pre-pandemic of maybe 10% of schools, particularly in London, engaging with tuition services, and the rest of them saying, well, no, we don't need external people coming in, we're fine, we've got our teachers, why would we pay for additional help, turning down potential additional help even though it's there. Where the government are putting in place these parachute payments and aiming, when the funding goes, that there will still be a culture of schools using tuition as part of their educational strategy. Now, they're only going to do that if it's easy for them to do so. If engaging in tuition involves an awful lot of work and an awful lot of administration for a school, and they're forced to do an assessment with the pupils, even though they've just done one in the classroom, so, well, if I'm going to use a tutor, then I'm going to do an additional assessment. Schools aren't going to want to engage with it. It'll be too difficult. You've got to think about the pressures on the school leaders that are putting this in place. And they've got finite time to do the best for their pupils, and that's the limiting resource here. So we're going to be careful on that front, that we're not overburdening a teacher. We've got to make sure that tuition is simple and easy to put in place. And then one consideration as well with the pre and post assessment is we're looking 15 weeks apart. So if we're taking post assessments and saying, look at the progress they've made, they've got more intelligent over this period of time. Well, it's 3 half terms. We probably hope that they progressed in that period of time, and they probably would have done so without the tuition. I don't think the tuition company can claim all the credit for it. So unless you're comparing it to a control group of people who have had no intervention whatsoever, then it becomes slightly meaningless data anyway, as much as we'd probably like to take credit for all the progress that the pupils have made. And one thing I was going to jump back to from earlier as well, the attendance from this idea that online at home is worse because attendance is lower. Sorry, I've racked up a load of points that I'm all cramming in at once. We had this with the EF last year. They were saying, oh, online at home is worse because there's lower attendance. But we've got to think about the pupils that do attend. What is the impact for them? The aim of the NTP is to provide the same opportunities in life to the disadvantaged pupils that the better off peers are getting. the better off peers aren't coming out of their regular classes to have tuition. The better off peers aren't having to stick around after school to have tuition straight off the back of a 6-hour day and then travel home when it's darker. Their better off peers are having tuition at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, and that is replacing them sitting on Twitter, Instagram, or playing their Xbox. So online at home, although attendance is lower for the pupils that do attend, think about the impact that it's having for them, and take that into account when we quantify how good is online in school, online after school, in person, online at home. Yeah, there's all my points in one quick.
Absolutely, no, there's a load of food for thought there, and I'm glad you made them, because it gives me a nice segue now to the next thing that I was going to steer us towards. So let's keep that going, and we have some hands raised. We get to them in a second. But the next point I was moving to was training, essentially. So building on the points that you just raised there, Johnny, if we're talking about how we assess child performance and how we make sure that those online tutoring lessons are actually of greater benefit to the kids than just attending normal school, is there any kind of like training or skill set that your tutors would need to have going into that? Has NTP changed your approach to that at all? So at the same time as adding to some of the points that Johnny raised, maybe address some of that a little bit. Adam, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I've probably got a bit less to say about the training point, but
yeah, that's fine.
What I will say on that, because our tutors are all already qualified teachers, we do provide training, but that's more about translating those classroom skills into the tuition format. Yeah. And we're very clear that those are not the same set of skills. I think there's a lot of overlap, and we do believe that being a teacher helps you be a good tutor, but it's not a given. The one point I just wanted to pick up from Johnny, I absolutely agree that kind of pre and post and just saying, yeah, they got 50% and now they've got 70%, aren't we fantastic? That's pretty weak. At the same time, something I'm really concerned about is we're doing this massive experiment, the NTP, more tutoring than has ever been done in this country for disadvantaged young people. We're probably going to come out of it with very little data on impact, and I think that's a real concern for me. And it's probably, the answer is probably not everyone doing the same pre and post assessment, but I do think there needs to be something that at the end of it we can show. Yeah, going back to the conversation with schools, we do need to be able to say, yeah, tuition works. Here's the data. It's worthwhile you putting the time and money into this. But sorry, that's a bit off topic.
Absolutely, no, not at all.
Responsibility of the tuition provider, or should that be the responsibility of the program administrator or EF or
well, exactly.
Look over this?
Yeah,
I think we did one last year. We did a post impact and went through it ourselves, and but we were never asked to do that, were we? But we did do one ourselves, and we do provide the schools an impact by giving them the report at the end, 15 hours. And it does look at things, as we've spoken about, confidence and, and engagement, etc., all the softer skills that were expected from the tuition programme. But we've also got to remember a lot of schools last year put less pupil premium and disadvantaged children on the programme last year. I think this year you've found that there's more disadvantaged pupils on the programme. And I don't know if you're having the same experience, the rest of you, but we're definitely having an experience of more disadvantaged pupils this year, which is great.
That's fantastic. Yeah, sorry, Stephen, did you want to hop in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on both points Adam raised, actually. So in terms of training, we are in exactly the same situation where we use qualified teachers only on the NTP, and our investment in training at the beginning is really kind of geared towards how that translates into being a tutor. But also we can't forget that training is only one part of how we make sure that our tutors are performing, and that's a full and robust quality assurance process, and then further CPD kind of informed from that point, so that every tutor is taking how can you be a good tutor to being a great tutor, and how can a great tutor become an excellent tutor, and kind of really kind of pushing those through investment in either new courses or kind of revisiting some old courses that have been going through. And that for us is a big part of our kind of journey last year and this year, that kind of quality assurance process to kind of really drive increasing performance. And then just picking up on the data and impact performance. Yeah. I don't quite know how we get around this without a national kind of survey and kind of taking, and I think Johnny's point earlier was very good in that you can only do this by comparing against a cohort of children that haven't been through tuition and to kind of work out where the impact has been and where that impact hasn't been. I just feel that will that ever become the case? Because actually, if children need tuition, you don't want a control group of children that really need tuition that don't get it. So there's always going to be an imperfect kind of data collection model and kind of how much tuition does increase. But from our kind of own data, we are seeing that schools are really reporting that children are making an increase not only within that tuition session, but after tuition has happened, and that kind of engagement in the classroom and the engagement in the subject has really increased from that. And I think we can fixate on the improvement that happens within the tuition session, but also we need to be cognizant of the fact that tuition goes beyond those 15 hours, and actually a boost at the beginning really kind of helps in year 2 and year 3 of that student as well.
We can't forget with measuring impact, particularly with control groups, that schools have to buy into that, and it's a lot of work for schools, and we all know that they have very, very little capacity to do that. And then picking up on that capacity thing, I agree with everybody with the training. We also have qualified teachers. They go through a really rigorous recruitment process and then really rigorous training where we focus on planning, delivery and evaluation, pedagogical approaches, our pedagogical approaches in our own learning cloud. So we deliver just online. So they also need training in the functionality of the online platform, not just the pedagogical part of translating what they might know in the mainstream classroom face-to-face to the online, but also how does it work? How do you log on? How do you kind of set a poll for students and stuff? So that adds another layer of training. But also what we focus on as well within our training, which is important, is that we take very much equality. It's not just about the teaching and learning that happens in the class. The quality is really holistic. So it's about everything that tutor has to do. So it's about the quality of the progress trackers that they complete, that the comments in there are meaningful and that they complete it on time and that they access them in the right place. So it's all kind of the admin stuff as well that tutors have to take on. We have to train them in that so that everything that a student and a school comes to contact with tutor has to be of high quality, and whatever part the tutor has in that, not just in the 45-minute lesson, but everything around it has to be of high quality as well. So there's a lot for tutors to take on actually when they do this kind of thing. It's not just that 45 minutes for us anyway. So we focus very much on that because schools don't have the capacity to be chasing us on a progress tracker or to be asking, what does this comment mean? So it's important that we train our tutors to be able to do that efficiently and effectively for the schools.
Absolutely, that's really interesting. To build on the kind of point that we've been talking about, and it's a very interesting one about how, in order for NTP to be practical, that there needs to be some communication about the results from it, that kind of like data delivery. I guess that's one big communication topic that you all probably want to be able to share, and obviously that comes with its own difficulties. But are there other points that you would like to communicate? Are there facts about the NTP, or even just like practical stuff like tutor training, or that you'd like to communicate to your tutors or the schools or the parents involved that you don't think there's wide understanding of?
I mean, one comment for me. I think one thing that's very poorly understood, and I don't know if this falls within the NTP bracket, but this year they've introduced a schools-led route, which is slightly different from what we had last year. Yeah. And Fionn, stop me if this is off topic, but
please.
That to me is actually a positive evolution. It's not perfect, but I think it's moving in the right direction. And that is incredibly poorly understood by schools, at least in our experience. We see it as it's cheaper for schools, it's easier for everyone involved because there's not all the admin. A lot of schools think it can only be used for their own teaching staff or TAs and so on. And I think that message has just not got out, that it can be used for quality providers like members of this panel.
I think that would also be an easy message to push at them, that you know, this is what school ed is. You can use these tutors, your own or local tutors, but you can also use this list of 60 odd tuition partners who have gone through a really rigorous vetting process. They might be a really good solution for you. That message isn't really being pushed, which I think is quite an obvious one.
I also think that the schools really do not understand what the differences is between school-led and partner-led tuition. The school-led, they believe that they have to pay 25% of their own budget, you know, whatever, and which is not the case if the tuition is less, you know, is cheaper than the £18.50 that's been quoted on these pieces of paper everywhere. So it's the communication to the schools, and the paper that came out from DFE is just so confusing for them. And there's nobody in the government really trying to put that right and to say, you know, actually, you know, this is what it is. I mean, every single school that we speak to about school-led really do not understand it, and it's a minefield for them. And they think they're alone. And every school, they think they're alone and don't want to say that we really don't understand it, because they think that they, you know, that makes them look stupid.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that, but yeah, as you say, the communication about the school ed has been slightly subpar. The schools are very confused about the different funding options available to them this year. But the other issue that I see with the school ed tutoring grant is this idea that, you know, you can use it on your own staff to provide tuition. But presumably their own staff, I mean, I've certainly seen a lot of schools in my time, and every single member of staff was pre-pandemic working as absolutely hard as they could for the benefit of an education of their pupils. And so this funding, if it is being used for their own staff, then it can't be providing anything additional, because they were already operating at 100%. So if you're not using school ed, if you're not using NTP to get in external services, to get the cavalry coming in, to get additional support, then you're not providing catch up. And yet we know that school budgets are so constrained that they're constantly trying to find new ways to fund, you know, their staff costs, which is the highest line on their accounts. That this opportunity comes along and they say, oh, right, okay, this person that was a teaching assistant last year, well, if we use them as a tutor this year, you know, it'll be pretty similar to what they were doing. They're going to sit with 2-3 pupils at a time and work with them. We can call that tuition. Then I'm very concerned that that is not a catch-up activity. So yeah, but you know, it's, as we pointed out, it's so much more convenient than this year's national tuition program. There's no administration involved. They can use someone that they already know. They don't need to reach out and establish new connections. So going forward, we need to find some sort of middle ground between these two, I think, because having them compete against each other is no good. And we already saw, a couple of weeks ago, the numbers came out where school-led tutoring is 200,000 pupils so far, and NTP is 50,000 pupils, you know, way off where it should be. So introducing something to undercut something that you're trying to double seems like a slightly shooting yourself in the foot move. But yeah, any thoughts?
We found something similar, Johnny. We went through our last year's schools and asked them, would they also like to do school-led tuition, because the NTP is pushing that they use all 3 routes if they can. So we said, you know, you can use both of them, or we're going to use our own teachers for school-led. And then a few weeks later, they come back asking, actually, can you do the school-led for us as well? Because our teachers just don't want to do it. Because as you say, they're far too busy anyhow.
Will from Bramble makes the excellent point that if you say to schools or to teachers, we're going to make your school day longer, they balk at the idea and will march in the streets. But if you say, we're going to pay you to come in and do some after school tuition, they say, oh yeah, that sounds good. But the two things are actually exactly the same as each other. So just different packaging.
Absolutely. Yeah, I suppose in so many cases, if they'd wanted to provide after school tuition, they would already be providing it through some of your companies anyway, and they might be going the NTP through the routes. Fantastic. Yeah, it's very good points being made so far. I'm going to try to serve my own position here and steer us towards technology. What kind of tech tools could be implemented to make your life easier? What you're using at the moment? Are there good aspects or bad aspects? Is there anything that you want to see? Any like software or online classroom or anything that you that would make your life easier in serving NTP work?
I'm going to be quite controversial.
Oh yeah.
A good system that works for putting all of our admin onto.
Right. I'll send you my business card after this, Alan. Yeah.
We have the hub for that, Helen.
What?
We have the hub for that.
So to sort of, it's a in joke, but there's a tuition hub where we put all of the information on, and it's getting so much better than it was, but there's a few teething problems with it. So from a technology point of view, it could have been so much better to ensure that schools were able to put more pupils on quicker and able to support what we're doing as tutoring partners. So that would have been much better. Us ourselves, for our online tutoring, we use the Infinity platform, and it works pretty well for us. Infinity, it's similar to Bramble and others, but it works for us, and it's pretty good.
We have our own platform that we've built, and we've been teaching and tutoring since 2012. So we built the platform then, and we've continued to develop it since. So it's in 3 parts. It has a scheduling tool, an administrative tool where you can download all the data. Then it has the online classroom, and then it has learning basis, which sits outside, where teachers and students continue to learn outside of lessons. So we're in the process now of further developing that, actually having a totally new version of it. And the key there is that we surface all the data that we can see to the schools, so they can log in and see how the students are progressing and how much they're spending and all those kind of things. So we should be on track for delivery of that at Easter. So maybe we should have just looked for another option, Fionn, rather than all the hard work and the testing.
There you go. I'll be sending out lots of business cards. Yeah, that is really.
Stop talking about
TutorCruncher
platforms. Fionn's here promoting.
Yeah. Oh, did you want to contribute, Johnny? Oh gosh, what a surprise!
Teleportation, if that's possible, all the convenience of online tuition, and then all the desirability of face-to-face is the only tech advancement we're waiting for now. But it doesn't seem to be coming soon. Are you working on that, Fionn?
Absolutely. We're in conversation with the producers on Star Trek, and they're giving us some good inside tips. We'll have the beam me up Scotty in the next 6 to 9 months, I'd say. But just on the point of, I guess, online classrooms themselves, because even just me on my own calls, whether it's sales or doing a quiz with my family or something, there are obviously tools that are designed specifically for the purpose, so for education. And then there's tools that everybody knows about, by which I basically mean Zoom. I find it hard to navigate which one makes more sense to use, because I do find that people who aren't particularly experienced in, a load of purpose-built for education classrooms and whiteboards can be a bit taken aback by them sometimes, and they just don't know how they work. But where do you all fall on would you just rather use Zoom because everybody's familiar with it, or are you looking for an online classroom that has a whole range of tools, all that kind of stuff?
I think that most of us have that kind of classroom online. As I said, we use the Infinity, what does exactly what you're saying. It has got all the tools that we need, and I believe that everyone else, as Vanessa said, her system's the same. Johnny uses, I believe you use Bramble as well, which it does the same thing. And I think that all of us had to get into that position very quickly last year. For those that were on the programme last year, when COVID hit and we had to move online very quickly, we had to develop or get something that worked for everyone, and that automatically records and stores. So for safeguarding purposes, and that was probably the most important part, really, is that it records automatically and stores automatically, and you can, from a safeguarding point of view, and it is easy to access and sort of web-based, so you don't have to download anything. It's really simple for a student of 6 to be able to use, to press a button to say that they're starting their lesson, and that's what you've got to try and look at a lot of the parents' first language isn't English that we work with. So it's, you know, for a 6-year-old to be able to understand it really. And that was, I think, the most important thing for us. I probably think others would.
We had a struggle last year with what we called familiarity resistance. So we chose Bramble because, as you point out, you want that simplicity. There's no download necessary. You don't need to log in. You just follow a link and you're off. But because schools didn't know this platform, you know, pretty much we talk about Zoom and Google Meet, but actually schools are Microsoft natives, aren't they? There's somehow Microsoft managed to corner that market. But if you were trying to log into a Microsoft Teams room as a school or as a pupil and it went wrong, you'd be like, oh, I must have done something wrong. So I'll call my IT team and get this fixed. If you try and log into a Bramble room and you've never heard of Bramble before, as a school or as a pupil, you go, and something goes wrong, it's like, well, what is this thing? Oh, this is rubbish, it doesn't work. And they put the blame because of there's a lack of familiarity on the platform rather than on the fact that they've got a firewall that's blocking it, or they pressed join without voice and then were surprised that no one could hear them. And that's a really, really tricky one to overcome that we've sort of been working on, and sort of putting in place sort of tests beforehand and getting them used to it and getting them familiar so that they don't have that knee-jerk reaction. Because, yeah, we had a school that insisted on switching across to Teams. And then they said, oh, yeah, but obviously the whiteboard in Teams doesn't work very well. So you then have to go to this third-party website to do the whiteboard. I said, well, this is clunky. You know, this isn't a good learning experience. So, yeah, that was our sort of big challenge last year that we've been working hard to overcome.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Even just from my own experience of being a provider of a small software company, I fully get what you mean, that if someone knows the name of the company, they're a lot more forgiving about any issues that they have with it. But we're actually drawing close to kind of the end of the hour, which absolutely flew. Last thing I was going to ask everybody, just in like a short 60 seconds summary, any key points that you see as being super important to making the NTP a success in the long run. So whoever wants to jump in on that, they can. I won't hand it over to someone and throw them under the bus, but
I'll go with one. I've got a few.
Great.
Might have two. The first one is, I think, more flexibility within the programme. That started this year. So last year, students were only allowed one block. This year, they're allowed more than one block, which schools really liked. But I think maybe that we move away from, not always, but 15 hours, maybe move away from the small group sizes, because for some schools, 6 students in a group for revision, or 12 students even in a group for revision, over 6 lessons or 6 hours or 10 hours works for them. We already said earlier with assessments that schools know their students best. They probably know their students best as well when it comes to what kind of tutoring might work for them. So I think more flexibility would be good, and continued funding, of course, because the subsidy on the tuition partner will go down to 70% this year. I think it's meant to be 60% next year, and then 10% the following year. You know, such a step down may not be a good thing. So to maintain funding and possibly bring school ed and TP together in some way. I got 3 then, didn't I? Sorry, I did say 1.
I think my biggest wish, and this is for all you tutors out there, is to not accept a job and then not turn up to it. So I think that the biggest frustration for us is tutors coming on board and then deciding the last minute not to turn up at school, not to come online, or to change their minds at the last minute. To me, that all that does is let children down. And, you know, so if I could have a wish that we could have more consistency with tutors and staff, and that's, I know it's a big wish, but it's reality of the beast.
As the head on, we have completion bonuses built into our tutor pay to try and avert that, because it's something we've seen since 2008. Especially we use university undergrads. We used to have people that would say, oh gosh, I've got my own exams coming up, I'm a bit pressured, I can't teach anymore. We nip that in the bud very early on, so that if you take on a program, you're committed from start to finish. But my wishes for the NTP: ease and simplicity. let's make this seem like a very accessible way for schools to get extra support and boost their pupil attainment. And that way we'll have a legacy of hopefully all schools using tuition as a part of their educational strategy.
Yeah, so my wish is in a similar vein. I hope that any future incarnation of the NTP focuses on facilitating, and I use that word facilitating very consciously, the rollout of high quality tuition to disadvantaged young people. You know, I don't think there's a role for a central administrator to get involved in administering and tracking the delivery of tuition. It's things like quality assuring providers, providing visibility to schools on who those providers are, getting the message out to schools, you know, winning the hearts and minds on the efficacy of tuition. That's the stuff that we can't do and that schools can't do. Everything else, leave tuition providers to do what they do best.
I'm just going to say everything that everyone else has mentioned above. It's easy going last. I think from my point of view, that ease of delivery and ease of access for tuition is key. If we can get that right, then NTP will become a real powerhouse of education and kind of helping diminish the difference of disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged. But having that flexibility, like Helen said, that flexibility of delivering within a national programme to make sure that we are meeting the needs of not only the pupils, but the needs of the schools as well, is key for the kind of continuation of the success of NTP. But, you know, looking at the numbers that came out last year and the numbers that will happen this year, there is definitely an argument that NTP has already been a success, and we need to keep building on that success that's already happened.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the numbers are increasing, and it's brilliant that so many kids are getting the support that they need and getting the catch up they need. And you know, we've got some absolutely brilliant tutors delivering absolutely amazing job. And I think they need to be thanked for that because they're brilliant. Absolutely.
And I think the other thing to mention is that, you know, as Johnny said, 10% of schools 3, 4, 5 years ago didn't really only use tuition. This year, this has brought the impact that tuition can have to schools that would never consider tuition before. And I think that is to be congratulated.
Absolutely. Yeah. I join you in that appreciation. Congratulations, 100%. But yeah, I think that brings us essentially to a close. Anyone else with any other closing statements? No? Fantastic. Well, thanks for being a phenomenal panel. As I said, the hour absolutely flew. And I'd say people took so much out of it, and I took a few notes for my own professional developments that that are definitely going to get used. So yeah, thanks for a phenomenal panel. I am hanging around at least for the next hour, so sorry attendees, you're not getting rid of me just yet. But yeah, but I suppose I'm speaking for the room, I'm sure, when I say thanks very much for the contributions. And yeah, we'll be seeing you throughout the remainder of the festival, I imagine.
Yeah, Fionn, I'm actually just gonna show everyone here probably a product of your own making, which is just before we wrap up here is a short video advert about TutorCruncher. So for those of you who already use TutorCruncher, this will be a nice confirmation of why you chose TutorCruncher, and for those who don't, hopefully this can convince you otherwise. But after this, we'll be going essentially straight into the 11 a.m. roundtable, but a huge thank you to our panelists who were with us for this time round.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Are you running a tutoring company? Do you spend most of your time lost in spreadsheets, creating invoices and doing admin? Don't you wish you had more time to grow your business and improve your services whilst keeping track of everything you currently do? Of course, you could hire more administrative staff, but there must be a better solution. We're here to help. TutorCruncher is exactly what you've been looking for. TutorCruncher is web-based tutoring business management software that will streamline management your company. How? Let's look into that. TutorCruncher will put all the information together that you currently work with, schedule lessons, organize your tutors, students and locations, produce up-to-date business analytics and statistics, send automated emails to clients and tutors, automate your invoicing and payroll systems, and have tutor, parent, and pupil logins. But there's more. TutorCruncher is a secure cloud-based system, so you get all this and much, much more from any device, anytime, anywhere in the world. Sign up today, www.tutorcruncher.com, and watch us transform your business.
Wow. Well, that would convince even the
Mic drop, right?
most independent of tutors. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Fionn, we're going to bring this particular roundtable to a close.